In the beginning, God created man and woman. And ever since, we have been asking questions. Questions about love, marriage, singleness, sex, and romance. Loveology, the theology of love.
Week 3. These Loveology nights on Monday nights have just been absolutely fantastic. Kara and I have been able to just facilitate conversations, and we break up into table groups, and we talk about just going further in depth, and people are making relationships, and we offered you double dates, and this blind double date to go hang out with another couple you've never met before. And so I just heard the funniest story as a double date was meeting the other couple who doesn't know, because it's a blind double date. The other couple who doesn't know who they're about to meet, they met 5 other couples while they're like, "Are you guys them? Are you guys them? Are you guys them?" None of them were them. They eventually found who they were looking for. And so, it's just hilarious, but it's so much fun. If you haven't done that, we'll give more information at the end of service. But I want to talk about singleness today. Oh, my single people. Oh, my single people. I got a ring, so I can't sing it. Otherwise, usually, I'm perfectly on pitch. And so we're going to talk about singleness, and I think we want to take it from a place that I want us to really kind of strip our ideas for what we really kind of view singleness as and is, because I think we've done single people a disservice for a long period of time. We've been trying to fix them instead of empower them. You know what I mean? And so I want us to really understand, because I follow a God. His name's Jesus, and he was single, and he was perfect. So when I model my life after a guy, this Jewish rabbi, and as I follow him as closely as I can, the tension of it in the midst of it is, wait a second, he was single, like Paul, just an admirer I am of his writings and his teachings all throughout the Bible, also single. He most likely, historians would say that he had lost his wife somewhere along the way due to a death. And so here, all of a sudden, you see this relationship, and you say, okay, what is this? Because then I also read the Bible in Proverbs chapter 18, verse 22, and it says things like this. It says, okay, the man who finds a wife finds a treasure. He's such a treasure. You treasure you. If I could just figure out that key to unlock that, my word. I mean, so she's just such a treasure. She's a treasure of my life. And he receives favor from the Lord. I read a moment like that in the Bible. I'm so excited about it but then I also read in 1 Corinthians chapter 7, verse 7, this moment where Paul details out an entire chapter about love, about sex, about relationships, about all these different things. And he details out singleness. And he says this. He says, but I wish everyone were single. Huh? Paul, I'm not tracking with you. Because I love being married. I love my marriage. I love being a house spouse. I always make that joke. It's the best roommate I've ever had. She does her dishes afterwards, and I had college roommates who didn't do that. They were the worst, and they were disgusting, and she's not. She's beautiful, and she's amazing, and I love that. And Paul says, but I wish everyone were single just as I am. Yet each person has a special gift from God of one kind or another. But the reality is we have to come and talk about this thing from a place and an understanding that singleness is a gift, that marriage is a gift. And we need to look at people in the season of life that they're in more than where you want them to be. We're going to look at people and say, you know what, man, you're going to be a great married, but why don't you be a great single first? Because when you put Jesus at the center of anything, it heals it. You want your singleness to get healed, put Jesus at the center of it. Put eyes for the season that you're in right now. You want Jesus to heal your marriage, put Jesus at the center of it. I mean, it just goes all with saying, because I think the church has just done a really poor job at this, because oftentimes we take traditions and we put traditions over the gospel. You realize moments like that? We're like, well, that's how we've always done it. Well, does the Bible say that we have to do it that way? Well, that's just the way we've always done it. Sometimes the gospel just makes that tension in your life to take you further than you've ever been. I think this would be one of them. Culturally, the national average for someone getting married in this day and age is 30. Well, previously, culturally, it would say that it was like 21 or 20 or even younger. And as we've progressed as a culture, that age for the average marriage is much later. But the church oftentimes looks at 25-year-olds and say, what's wrong? Why aren't you married yet? By the time I was your age, I had 2 kids. But just because you did that doesn't mean they need to do that. That we would just empower people. So I've just, if you're single, all the single people, if you're single, this is for you. If you're married, this is for you. Because we're developing a theology. We're developing a biblical basis for love, for singleness, for sex. The reality is this gift of singleness, it might not be a gift that you want. So when someone's just trying to fix you up and set you up all the time, you're being reminded that you're not complete. But I don't find a moment in the Bible that says that you'll be complete when you get married, that all of a sudden everything will be fixed. I find moments in the Bible where it says Jesus heals you. I find moments in the Bible where marriage, it enhances, it grows. You partner together with somebody. All of a sudden, you're fused together, the scriptures would say. So let's come at it from that premise. Let's grow in this together. Let's understand. Let's care for people well. I want to do a little interview this morning and with our time together. It was fantastic at the 9 a.m. service. We want to keep doing it. I want to invite my friends David and Susan Barrow and Jesse. Go ahead and come on up and let's sit down. Let's sit down and talk. Yeah, give them a round of applause.
Hello, Jimmy.
Hello.
Jimmy.
Yeah, I'm Jimmy, just so you know. The Roots couldn't make it today, and so it's just me. I felt like that was funnier.
Yeah.
You guys are in bed by 9. You don't know who it is. It's fine. He's a talk show host, and I don't think he loves Jesus, but we'll get him saved eventually. All right. Hi, David. Hi, Susan.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi, Jesse. Let me introduce you to these people real fast. Jesse, I think we met Jesse, you were 16, 17 years old. She was in our youth group. Jesse and I were co-workers together at a previous church we worked at. We've just seen her grow, and all the way to the point where we had to have her on our staff. And when she graduated from college, we hired her, and she's been such a blessing. If you haven't done growth tracks yet, Jesse's growth tracks. If you're in a life group, Jesse's life groups. Like all the discipleship. So how old, 26? 24, okay. She carries herself so much older. 24, and she probably leads the largest section of our church. Come on. Doing an incredible job with it. And she's roommates with Jeff and Tony Bernie. And then David and Susan Barrow. David and Susan Barrow have been going to the church for a couple years now and just love you guys. Love your family. Love your boys, love your girl, and just love who you guys are. David and Susan, just a little backstory on them. After 2 decades and a decade of marriage separately, they both were divorced and went into singleness for 7 years, correct? 7 years, and then found each other in the mustard aisle.
At Costco.
That's a real story.
Like everybody does.
And the saddest part of that story is there's no Costco dog involved.
No hot dog. He was cheap.
He's cheap. If you're cheaper than a Costco dog, you cheap.
I'm cheap.
Yeah, man. And so, fell in love, and but from previous marriages, both had sets of kids, and so we want to talk about this today from singleness. What was it like re-entering the singleness? What's it like being an adult female working 2 different jobs, leading all of these people, and being single in the midst of all of that? So, just a handful of questions. That's some kind of brief premise about them. So, first one is this. For all of you, let's start with David. What was it like being married for 23 years and then re-entering back into singleness as a father, as a worker, as a Christ follower? What was that like?
It sucked. So,
on to Susan.
no, so I thought of myself as being a couple, so sort of my mind being refreshed of, hey, I'm single, but I was a single father. I had 2 boys, and so that was definitely part of who I was and how I traveled. And I remember wanting to do it well, to be a single father well, and looking for a single men's group. There wasn't one. And so that may not be surprising, but so I had to start one. With a friend, we started one. And I missed my boys, down to the cellular level when they were gone with their mom. So I would think of creative ways to stay connected with them, and using cologne was one of my most creative, where I would give them a bottle of my cologne so they would remember me when they were wearing it, and I knew that I was with them when they were away.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. And that's just real. And I think one of the most important things of this conversation, you're getting a snapshot of what it would be like just being on a couch with these 3 people. Susan, what was it like for you re-entering back into singleness after walking through a divorce?
Yeah, for me, it was like a ripping and a tearing apart, and there was just this open, fleshy wound that was there, and there was a grieving process that I had to go through. In the Bible it says, and we talked about this, that, when you're married, 2 become 1. Well, all of a sudden now that 1 has to become 2.
Yeah.
And I wore my name is Susan, I have 3 kids, and I'm a single mom, like a badge. And it was like a badge of honor, but it's almost like I relied on that more than I did other things that I should have.
Yeah.
But I did eventually find my way in it, but it was very, very painful.
Yeah. More specifically, even for the both of you, what was it like re-entering into singleness in your friendships or even in your church? Yeah, what was that experience like?
Well, my church got excited because they had a new single socials director. So they were excited about that. As far as with friends, all of a sudden, you've been in married couples. And so your small groups were all married couples. And now all of a sudden you're single and you don't get invited to anything. Yeah. And there's a season you go through. I had a 2-year period where I'm still legally married, and at the same time, I'm going through a divorce. So there, no place for me during that time.
Yeah.
So the church didn't know what to do with us, with people like that. And, I think for widows, we embrace widows.
Yeah.
Absolutely. We come around them. But for single people going through divorce, it's almost like we put them through shame.
Yeah.
And, I would love to see us treat a single mom or dad just like we would if a spouse died. Come alongside of them. Love them. They don't get hugged. They don't, get invited over very often.
Yeah, I think that's, very specifically, even from my perspective, looking at these 2, and okay, we read the Bible, God hates divorce, right? Yeah, God hates divorce, but he loves people. And so even people who walk through something as traumatic and as broken as something like that could be, and not the way that God intended marriage, they are you guys are very aware. You talk about it, David, that failure of marriage, and you have that feeling. The church doesn't need to remind us of that, but we can remind that we are children of God, that we can come alongside people, and not just people who have gone through a loss, but people who have gone through a different kind of loss. It is a death.
Absolutely.
It is a mourning process. And we got to be able to come around people. We don't want to encourage that by any means, divorce. No, absolutely not. We'll do everything in our power to keep people together because that's the way God intended it. But as culturally, as those statistics continue to rise, how does the church care for those needs of different people? What about you, Jesse? What was it like dating and going into singleness in that process? What kind of, or skewed kind of views of marriage?
For me, I grew up for the first 23 years of my life. I wasn't in a relationship, didn't date through middle school or high school or really until the very end of college. And so for me, it was crazy because growing up, especially in the church, you always hear in youth group, your time of singleness is to prepare yourself for the one that you're waiting for, to be the one that you're waiting for is waiting for. And this idea that this time is preparation for this person that you're going to meet one day. Mm-hmm. And so in my head, I was like, okay, I get it. So in order to make it, you have to be married. And in the midst of this also with me, I was learning about God, and God began calling me to ministry, and my there's not very many single pastors,
No.
honestly, that you really, especially as a woman. And so I was like, okay, I need to be married. I need to make it. And so I always viewed my singleness as a curse. I viewed it as something was wrong with me, something, I was doing something wrong. And I had people tell me, are you afraid of intimacy? Why are you not married? Or people say, you want to be a pastor, but you need to be married because they're going to hire a husband and not you. And these ideas that really continued to cement in my head that it was a curse to be single. And none of it, I don't think, was ill-willed. I think it was just this skewed perspective that we have a tendency to idolize marriage in the church.
Yeah.
We have a tendency to view it as an idol, to view it as the varsity team, and that the single people are working really hard to make it to the varsity team from JV. And so going into a relationship, I brought that with me, and it ended up destroying my relationship because I set these unrealistic ideals on my boyfriend, and I was like, we're going to get married and all these things, and I lost all of who God had called me to be in order to become this person that was going to be married and make it. And through the process of that relationship ending, I felt destroyed. I felt like I had failed. I felt like I had let even the church down, that I was now single again. Because people, when you get into a relationship, they're like, congratulations. It's like, why are you congratulating me? Like, come on. And even within moments of me being broken up with, I had someone literally be like, so is there anyone else in your life? And I'm like, homie, like, I just lost the only fish in the sea that I wanted. Like, leave me alone. But it was this process of having to realize that I was placing my idol and my hope in my future in this idea, in my relationship status, and not in God.
Yeah.
And just the deconstruction of that was painful, but also so empowering as God just walked beside me in that.
Yeah. That's so special. And, and I think even in this process and sitting with these two, but sitting with walking Jessie and being with her in the midst of that process, I mean, Kara and I, we just learned so much about how even our language, how it can skew, how it can change, and how it can communicate something that we're not wanting to communicate that. But that's what's being communicated. Oh, don't worry. When you get married, you'll be fixed, and those things will change, and it's just not the reality. And so even for the three of you, okay, so re-entering back into singleness, that process, but then how did singleness, how did it affect your relationship with Jesus, either positively or negatively? What was that process? Dave, why don't you start us off?
Yeah. So I was reading a book called Strength Finders, and that book asked the question, what are you great at? And the pivotal word is great. It wasn't what you're good at. It's what you're great at. And so I had just gone through divorce, so I felt like a failure, and I was like, well, what am I great at? I can make a great omelet, but that didn't seem to really be what the answer should be. I can herd cats, and if you know me professionally, I can truly herd cats. But what I wanted to be was a great father. Yeah. And so I set that out as my mission, to be a great dad. And so I made my kids my priority, which sounds like a great idea on the surface. But they became my God. I put them in place of God, and that worked until it didn't, that happens. And so God allowed me to pass through that learning, and it to the place where it's like, David, I love you just as you are. You don't have to, be a great dad. You don't have to be over involved in the church. I love you right where you are. I'm going to meet you right where you're at. And that was a powerful message for me to learn.
That's good. Susan, what about for you? What was that like, walking through a divorce and that hardship and your relationship with Jesus?
Yeah, for me, I went through a period where I was extremely surrendered to God in everything that I did. And then I decided that I'm going to take the wheel into my own hands. And I didn't listen to the advice and the wisdom and the counsel. And I got into dating relationships that were very unhealthy. And so my advice on that would be is that you're not going to find a man at a bar.
No.
And you probably might not even find him at church, to be honest. But
the single people in the room were like, dang it, why am I here?
Well, single guys go to
it.
church looking for a wife. That's what,
Yeah.
Anyways, but
looking for Jesus.
there was a point where looking for
Jesus,
a wife, Jesus.
Both?
Maybe.
Both.
Sorry.
They're looking for something. Okay, we've got that. They're looking for something.
So I had always been the girl that from day one, I was submitted to Jesus, I did it right, and I was just, but I had this curiosity, and I let that take over.
Yeah.
And I let the enemy kind of, get in my head. And so I walked into relationships that were not healthy, they were not godly,
Yeah.
and they hurt me, and they sent me back in my grief. And it took my daughter going on a missions trip and came home and was giving her testimony.
Yeah.
And I was nowhere near ready to even be in that room. And God just met me right there. And I surrendered, went back, and I've never looked back since then.
Yeah. That's amazing. And Jesse, even for you, what was that like?
Yeah, it was really difficult for me just because I put so much of my identity in being on the path to marriage and feeling like I made it. And so for me, when that ended, I was lost. I felt like I had surrendered so much of my identity to gain this thing that I thought would have value, would add the value to my life that I was seeking that only God can add. And so I walked through this process, this like tearing and ripping, where God was just taking all of these like idols out of my life. And I had to realize that walking forward, that like I had to be okay, me and Jesus. Like I had to be okay, and that if I was unhappy being single, being in a relationship wasn't going to fix that.
Yeah.
Because the reality is that no matter if you're in a relationship, no matter if you're single, the purpose of our life here is to pursue the call God has placed on our life and to become the person he's creating us to be. And he's going to bring a relationship into our life to enhance that.
Yeah.
And I think we have sometimes a selfish idea that we deserve this. God, we deserve marriage, or we deserve these things, and we don't deserve anything other than we get to like live life with Jesus.
Yeah.
And so I think for me, I had to walk through that process of seeking that out and be okay just figuring out who God was calling me to be, who he was calling, where he was calling me to go, and being obedient to that, and not being afraid of being single, and not being afraid of this and allowing that to be my identity, but rather my identity is in who God was calling me to be.
Yeah, I think so much even what I'm hearing is that as a church we need to kind of change our narrative, that we need to become much better, instead of trying to fix people, to empower people. I mean, and this goes for everybody. The season that you're in, let's empower Jesus to be at the center of that, opposed to, don't worry, it's going to get better, this can change, and these are, instead of being, because I think when we're trying to fix people, we have a view that we're the provider instead of God being the provider. And then we can just say, you know what, God, like you're going to provide, instead of me trying to fix people, because we don't even fix people. That's what Jesus did on the cross. And so if we can empower the season, because the right thing in the wrong season is the wrong thing. Right? So the right thing, but in the wrong season, is always going to end in failure. But the right thing in the right season, man, all of a sudden people can just really begin to take off with their lives and just be empowered and grow. And so I think another one, just sitting on your guys' couch, we start to wrap this up. What would you say? What would you say to people? David, Susan, start off. What would you tell others who are re-entering into singleness? Whether they're embracing it, they're just in it, or they're walking through a loss of a loved one, or divorce, or whatever the case may be. What would you say to them?
Well, the first thing I would say is take your time. There is no hurry. And that I was just talking to a friend who's going through divorce, and God uses it all.
Yeah.
He redeems all the pain, all the tears. I remember being on the floor in a fetal position, sobbing, and God has redeemed all that pain, and He's healed me. And then I met my wife. So this was before Susan didn't complete me.
Yeah.
Jesus did, and so He healed all those hurts, and then he said, hold on, I've got something special for you.
Yeah.
And so take your time.
Yeah. That's I mean, I think that's so rich for us to hear, you guys. I think it's just that's altering even our thoughts, how we speak to our kids and how we speak to people around us, that we would just allow God. So I think the tension is in the church is we just don't know what to do. Divorce, We just don't know what to do. So we find ourselves at a place where someone else will call, right? So someone else will bring them in, right? So someone else will do those things. Or God hates divorce, so do I hate divorce, right? And so you look at these things, you say, I don't know what to do. But when God loves everybody, we're going to come with that approach and care for people. And even if you don't know what to do, Susan said this best, even if you don't know what to do, just be there.
Just be there. And just hold them. Sometimes no words are the best words.
Yeah.
Absolutely. You know, I would agree with David, is take your time. You're not ready. You know, I was told that for every 5 years that you were married, I needed to stay single for a year. So that was a long time to try and walk it out. I did a lot of divorce recovery. The best one I found was called divorcecare.com. They're offered at many churches, and you can bring your kids right along with you, and they have a program for them. And that's one thing that I think I didn't do well, is I didn't always bring my kids along. I would go in my closet and cry, and they didn't, see me grieving. And it is a grieving process. And I think as a church, things that we can do is embrace them, invite them over, give them some money, take their kids.
Yeah.
Those kids may have lost a father. In my kids' case, their dad was not a part of their life after the first year. So they needed father figures to come in. You can't be at all 3 sporting events at one time. So they need somebody there rooting them on. And I did a really bad job at trying to teach them how to play baseball, but I tried, And when you find yourself in that pain, Jesus is the one that will heal it. It's not going to be another man. It's not going to be a relationship. Guard your body. Guard your heart. And do practical things. Like for me, the first year my kids did go back and forth, and I would come home, and it's dark, it's cold, and I didn't know what to do with myself. And so I tried to create an atmosphere in my home that I wanted to come into, and to find ways to invest my time in this season of trying to find it as a gift.
Yeah. Jesse, last question as we close up. How should we encourage those who are single without pushing our own agenda on them?
Yeah, I think just talking from one single person to the singles in the room, I just want to encourage you that you guys are not broken.
Yeah.
That there's not something wrong with you, but God has called you, He's equipped you, He's gifted you, and that your life started when you accepted Jesus into your heart.
Yeah.
It's not when you find that right person.
Yeah.
And so I just felt like I needed to say that. I don't know if there's someone in the room who needs to hear that, but you're not broken.
Yeah.
That God is using you exactly where you're at. And so I think with that, for those in the room that are married or even divorced and have been married before, encourage single people. Encourage them to pursue what God is doing in their life. For practical, don't ask them the first question when you talk to them, is there someone in your life? Who are you seeing? Are you on Christian Mingle? Do you have Tinder? Don't ask those questions, because you can ask them later, because I think those things will come up. If someone's struggling with their singleness, it's not because of an absence of a human in their life. It's because of a lack of an identity in Christ.
Come on.
And that God has spoken identity into them, and that God is going to bring someone into their life to enhance what He wants to do through them. And so encourage them in what they're passionate about. Encourage them in what God is doing right now in their life, because this season isn't a waste. It's not a waiting period. You're not in the waiting room of the doctor's office waiting to get fixed, but you're running the race. You're doing it. And so be encouraged and encourage those in that. And also don't set them up with anyone with 2 legs. You can set them up with someone who's great, but you don't need to just set them up with some random neighbor that you have down the road that happens to be single but is 15 years older than them. They're fine. So that's it. Not that has happened to me. I'm fine.
Man. Yeah. When you give a preacher a microphone, they're going to preach. Come on. Hey, can we thank these 3 for kind of sharing their hearts? Church, can we stand to our feet? We're in continual worship, and as we enter back into worship and continue this time, we want to just kind of prepare our hearts for what we were just listening to with some worship, but be able to continue to grow, because we want to empower your relationship with Jesus. One of the lines that have really driven this the whole time is this. I want us to all just kind of capture this. Life doesn't start when you get married. It starts when you meet Jesus. Life doesn't start when you get married. It starts when you meet Jesus. And Jesus was single. So as we process, as we grow in this, as we learn and learn how to love people well, you may have not been great at it before, but may we move forward in being better in this area and loving people where they are, encouraging with people where they are, encouraging people in marriages or single to pursue Jesus first. Let's close our eyes and let's just fix our hearts on Jesus and what he's teaching us today. Father God, we love you. We believe in you. We trust you. We allow you to be our provider in all these different areas, in the ebbs and flows of life, God. Father, we pray for people who have walked through divorce and they feel like they're failures, like they've not done it right. God, we just pray for your redemptive power just to cover them right now. Pray for people who are afraid of getting in a relationship because they've been hurt. They're distant from you even because they've been hurt. They've exposed their hearts and someone broke it. I mean, you just begin to restore their relationships. We trust you and fall in love with you and grow with you. Thank you, Jesus.